The frigid night air carried the scent of impending snow as Marshal Matthew Morgan guided his horse along the outskirts of Lone Pine, California. The winter of 1878 had been unforgiving, and tonight's patrol was no different as he pulled his coat tighter against the biting December wind. It was the flash of something pale beneath Eagle Creek Bridge that caught his attention, something that didn't belong among the frozen reeds and shadowy underpass. "Whoa! Thunder!" he murmured, reining his stallion to a halt. The mare's breath formed clouds in the cold night air as Matthew dismounted, his hand instinctively resting on his holstered Colt. Approaching cautiously, lantern extended before him, the yellow light finally illuminated what had caught his eye: a woman, curled into herself for warmth, asleep or unconscious beneath the stone bridge. "Madam," he called, kneeling beside her. She didn't stir. Her face was pale as moonlight, her lips tinged blue from cold. She wore a once fine dress now torn and muddied, and a thin shawl that provided little protection against the elements. No luggage surrounded her, just a small cloth bundle clutched in her delicate hands. Matthew touched her shoulder gently. "Madam, can you hear me?" When she didn't respond, he pressed 2 fingers to her neck, relieved to find a pulse, though alarmingly faint. Making a quick decision, he lifted her into his arms, surprised by how little she weighed. She couldn't have been more than 25, with copper-colored hair falling from what had once been an elegant arrangement. He managed to secure her on Thunder's back before climbing up behind her, supporting her limp form against his chest. "Let's get you somewhere warm," he said, though he knew she couldn't hear him. The 15-minute ride to Doc Wilson's house felt like an eternity with the unconscious woman in his arms. The doctor, roused from his evening reading, took one look at the woman and ushered them inside. "Found her under Eagle Creek Bridge," Matthew explained as they settled her on the examination table. "No identification that I could see." Doc Wilson's weathered hands worked quickly, checking her vital signs. "She's suffering from exposure and malnutrition," he said grimly. "And there's a wound on her temple that's been poorly tended." He lifted a strand of her hair to reveal a crusted gash. "Will she be all right?" Matthew asked, surprised by his own concern for this stranger. The doctor sighed. "Hard to say. The boarding house is full with those railroad surveyors, and she needs proper care, clean surroundings." Matthew found himself speaking before he'd fully considered the implications. "I have a spare room at my place. Clean sheets on the bed and a stove I can keep burning." Doc Wilson raised an eyebrow. "Mighty generous of you, Marshal." "Though some might talk." "Let them," Matthew said firmly. "I won't leave her to die because of town gossip." An hour later, with the doctor's reluctant blessing, Matthew carried the still unconscious woman into his modest 2-bedroom house at the edge of town. He'd built it himself after taking the Marshal position 3 years ago, hoping someday to fill it with a family. Instead, it had remained mostly empty, a testament to his solitary existence. He placed her on the bed in the spare room, which had fresh linens thanks to his weekly housekeeping habits. Following Doc Wilson's instructions, he stoked the fire in the small cast-iron stove in the corner, then hesitated at her muddied clothing. "Forgive the impropriety, madam," he murmured, carefully removing her boots and outer garments, leaving her in her chemise before tucking the thick quilt around her. He placed a glass of water on the bedside table and settled into the rocking chair by the stove, prepared for a long night of vigilance. It was nearly dawn when she first stirred, a small moan escaping her lips. Matthew, who had dozed off in the chair, was immediately alert. "Water," she whispered, her voice dry as prairie dust. He brought the glass to her lips, supporting her head as she drank greedily. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing irises the color of summer sage. "Where?" she began, panic rising in her voice as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "You're safe," Matthew assured her. "I'm Marshal Matthew Morgan of Lone Pine. Found you half frozen under Eagle Creek Bridge last night." She attempted to sit up, wincing at the effort. Thank you. I don't remember how I got there. What's your name, madam?" Her brow furrowed in concentration, then fear flashed across her features. I don't know. Why don't I know my own name?" Her breathing quickened as she clutched at the quilt. "Easy now," Matthew soothed. "Doc Wilson said you took a blow to the head. Memory loss can happen. It might come back in time." Tears welled in her eyes. "What am I to do until then?" Matthew considered her question. "Well, for now, You'll stay here and recover. We'll figure out the rest as we go. You need a name, though, something to call you until your memory returns." She touched the small bundle that Matthew had placed beside her bed. Opening it revealed a handkerchief with an embroidered O in one corner. "Perhaps Olivia," she suggested tentatively. "Olivia," Matthew repeated, nodding. "It suits you." She gave a weak smile. "Olivia it is, then. Though I've no idea what my surname might be. We'll say Olivia Collins for now," Matthew decided, recalling the first name that came to mind. "Doc Wilson will be by later to check on you. In the meantime, rest is what you need most." Over the next few days, Olivia's physical strength gradually returned, though her memory remained frustratingly blank. Matthew arranged for Mrs. Peterson, the seamstress, to bring some simple dresses that might fit Olivia, paid for from his own pocket. Doc Wilson visited daily, changing the bandage on her head wound and expressing cautious optimism about her recovery. Matthew found himself looking forward to returning home each evening. Olivia proved to be not only grateful but resourceful. By her fourth day in his home, she had insisted on cooking dinner, producing a surprisingly tasty stew from his meager pantry supplies. "You're feeling stronger, then?" he asked as they sat at his small kitchen table. "Yes, though my past remains a mystery," she replied, absently touching the bandage at her temple. "Marshal Morgan, Matthew, please." She smiled. "Matthew, I cannot impose on your kindness indefinitely. Once I'm fully recovered, I should find employment, perhaps at the hotel, or—" "There's no rush," he interrupted. "Winter's a hard time to start anew in Lone Pine." She studied him with those penetrating green eyes. "Why are you helping me? You've gone beyond duty." The question caught him off guard. "Why indeed? I suppose everyone deserves a helping hand when they're down." "Is that all?" she pressed. Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "It's the right thing to do." Olivia seemed about to say more, but instead nodded and returned to her stew. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but rather charged with unspoken possibilities. A week after he'd found her, Matthew returned home to find Olivia sitting at the kitchen table, a troubled expression on her face. "Something arrived for you," she said, indicating a telegram on the table. Matthew picked it up, quickly scanning its contents. His expression darkened. "Trouble. Train robbery 2 counties over," he confirmed. "The bandits are headed this way. I'll need to organize a posse." He hesitated, looking at her with concern. "I might be gone for several days." Fear flashed in her eyes. "I understand. Your duty comes first. Mrs. Peterson has offered to stay with you," he said. "I've already arranged it, just in case something like this came up." Olivia stood, smoothing her borrowed dress. "I'll be fine, Matthew. Please be careful." He found himself stepping closer to her, drawn by something he couldn't name. "I will. And Olivia, when I return, perhaps we should discuss more permanent arrangements for your situation." Her cheeks colored slightly. "Yes, perhaps we should." The following morning, as Matthew prepared to depart with 5 deputized men, Olivia appeared at the door of the marshal's office, a wrapped package in her hands. "Provisions," she explained, handing him the bundle. "And this." She pressed something small and cool into his palm, a silver St. Christopher medal. "I found it among my belongings. I don't know its significance to me, but perhaps it will keep you safe." Matthew was touched by the gesture. "Thank you. I'll return it when I come back." "See that you do," she said softly. The posse departed Lone Pine under gray skies, following reports of the Coal Gang's movement through the mountain passes. Matthew kept the silver medal in his breast pocket, finding himself touching it whenever thoughts of Olivia entered his mind, which was increasingly often. 3 days into their pursuit, they encountered the gang in a narrow canyon. Gunfire erupted without warning, and Matthew felt a searing pain as a bullet grazed his arm. Despite the injury, they managed to capture 3 of the 5 bandits, the others escaping into the wilderness. When they returned to Lone Pine with their prisoners, Matthew was exhausted and in pain, though he'd refused to delay their return for proper medical attention. All he could think about was getting back to his house to Olivia. He found her pacing the porch despite the cold, her face lighting up at the sight of him before quickly shifting to concern as she noticed his blood-stained sleeve. "You're hurt," she gasped, helping him inside. "It's just a graze," he assured her, though he was grateful for her support as she guided him to a chair. "Mrs. Peterson taught me some nursing skills, Olivia said, already gathering supplies. Let me tend to it. Her touch was gentle as she cleaned and bandaged his wound, her copper hair falling forward as she worked. Matthew found himself studying her face, the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the determined set of her jaw, the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks in the lamplight. There, she said at last, securing the bandage. You should have that looked at by Doc Wilson tomorrow, but it should hold for now. Thank you, he said, catching her hand before she could move away. I thought of you out there. Often. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull her hand away. I worried for you every moment. They remained like that, connected by touch and gaze, until the clock on the mantel chimed 9 times, breaking the spell. You should rest, Olivia said, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. Matthew nodded, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. We'll talk tomorrow, he promised. But the next day brought unexpected complications. Matthew was summoned to the telegraph office first thing in the morning, where he received news that made his blood run cold. Wanted posters had arrived from Sacramento, and among them was a sketch that bore a striking resemblance to Olivia, though the name listed was Octavia Crawford, wanted for theft and suspicion of murder. This can't be right, Matthew muttered to himself, staring at the poster. The charges alleged that Octavia Crawford had stolen jewelry from her employer, a wealthy rancher named Herbert Walsh, and was suspected in his subsequent death by poisoning. Matthew tucked the poster into his coat, his mind racing. The woman he'd come to know as Olivia showed no signs of being capable of such crimes. Yet the resemblance to the sketch was undeniable, and her memory loss conveniently prevented her from confirming or denying the accusations. Duty warred with his growing feelings as he made his way back home. He found Olivia in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. You're back early, she said with a smile that faltered when she saw his expression. What's wrong? Matthew pulled out a chair. Sit down, please. I need to ask you something important. Her face grew serious as she complied. Has my memory returned, if that's what you're wondering? Just fragments of grand house. Horses, someone shouting. Matthew placed the wanted poster on the table, watching her reaction carefully. Does the name Octavia Crawford mean anything to you? Olivia stared at the sketch, her face draining of color. That looks like me, she whispered. But I don't. I can't remember being this person or doing these things. The poster says Octavia Crawford worked as a lady's companion to Mrs. Walsh at the Triple W Ranch outside Sacramento. That she stole jewels worth a small fortune and is suspected of poisoning Mr. Walsh when he discovered the theft. Olivia shook her head vehemently. No, that can't be right. I don't feel capable of such things, Matthew. I don't. The resemblance is strong, he said gently. And your memory loss. You think I'm lying? Tears welled in her eyes. That I've been deceiving you all this time? Matthew reached across the table, taking her trembling hands in his. I don't know what to think. But as Marshal, I can't ignore this. What will you do? She asked, fear evident in her voice. He sighed heavily. I should take you into custody, send a telegram to Sacramento to verify the charges. And will you? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Matthew knew what his duty required. He also knew what his heart was telling him with increasing certainty. Not yet, he decided. First, I need to learn more about these allegations. The Triple W Ranch isn't far, 3 days' ride at most. I'll go there, speak with Mrs. Walsh directly. Relief flooded Olivia's features. Thank you for not assuming the worst of me. In the meantime, it would be best if you remained here, out of sight, Matthew advised. If word got out about the poster. I understand, she said. When will you leave? Tomorrow morning, he decided. I'll tell folks I'm following up on the remaining Cole gang members. That evening, as they sat before the fire, Olivia suddenly clutched her head, gasping in pain. What is it? Matthew was immediately at her side. A memory, she said through gritted teeth. So vivid. I was in a lavish bedroom, helping an elderly woman with her jewelry. She was kind to me, called me dear girl. Then someone entered, a man, angry, shouting about missing items. Herbert Walsh, Matthew suggested. Olivia frowned in concentration. I don't think so. The woman called him son. Edward, I think. He accused me of stealing, but the woman defended me. She looked up at Matthew, her eyes wide. I didn't steal anything, Matthew. I'm certain of it. This could be important, Matthew said. Edward Walsh the son. He wasn't mentioned in the poster. There's more, Olivia continued. I remember feeling afraid, not just of Edward, but for Mrs. Walsh. She was ill, taking medicine that Edward brought her. Her voice trailed off as the implications became clear. Matthew squeezed her hand. We need to consider the possibility that you witnessed something you weren't supposed to see, that someone wanted to silence you, and framed me in the process, Olivia finished. But how did I end up under that bridge in Lone Pine? That's what I aim to find out, Matthew promised. The following morning, Matthew prepared for his journey, packing provisions and checking his weapons. He found Olivia in the spare bedroom, clutching the small bundle she'd had when he found her. I've been trying to recall anything else about this, she said, indicating the handkerchief with the embroidered O. It feels important somehow. Matthew sat beside her on the bed. Keep trying. Any memory might help prove your innocence. She nodded, then reached up to touch his cheek. Be careful, Matthew. If Edward Walsh is what we suspect, he's dangerous. I can handle myself, he assured her, covering her hand with his own. And Olivia or Octavia, whatever your name truly is. I believe in you. I believe you're innocent. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. That means everything to me. When Matthew departed, the winter sun was barely cresting the eastern mountains. He left Olivia with strict instructions to stay inside and to trust only Mrs. Peterson, whom he'd taken into partial confidence about the situation. The journey to the Triple W Ranch was arduous, the mountain trails treacherous with ice and snow. Matthew had plenty of time to consider what he'd learned about Olivia and about his growing feelings for her. He'd been alone for so long, focused on his duties as marshal, that the depth of his attachment to this mysterious woman took him by surprise. On the third day, he arrived at the sprawling Triple W Ranch, a testament to the Walsh family's prosperity. He was greeted with suspicion by the ranch hands, but was eventually escorted to the main house when he identified himself as a marshal. The interior of the ranch house was opulent, with imported furniture and fine artwork adorning the walls. Matthew was led to a sunlit parlor where an elderly woman reclined on a chaise lounge, a blanket over her legs despite the roaring fire. Mrs. Eleanor Walsh? Matthew asked, removing his hat. Yes, she replied, her voice frail but her eyes sharp. What brings a marshal all the way from Lone Pine to my home? Matthew produced his badge. I'm investigating matters related to a former employee of yours, Octavia Crawford. A flash of emotion crossed the woman's face. Poor Octavia. Such a dreadful business. She gestured to a chair. Please, sit and tell me what this is about. Matthew took the offered seat. Madam, I have reason to believe Miss Crawford may have been wrongfully accused. I was hoping you might share your perspective on the events. Mrs. Walsh studied him intently. You've met her, haven't you? Is she alive? The question caught Matthew off guard. What makes you ask that? Because my son told me she perished while fleeing justice, Mrs. Walsh said. But I never believed it. Octavia was like a daughter to me during her 2 years here. She would never have stolen from me or harmed Herbert. Your husband, Matthew clarified. Yes, God rest his soul. She sighed. Herbert's death was unexpected heart failure, the doctor said. But Edward insisted Octavia had poisoned him after Herbert caught her stealing my jewels. And what do you believe, Mrs. Walsh? The elderly woman's eyes narrowed. I believe my son is a liar, Marshal. The jewels that went missing were pieces Herbert had promised would be mine to give to Octavia upon my death. Edward was furious about it. He's always been possessive of the family legacy. Matthew leaned forward. Mrs. Walsh, did you ever suspect your son might have been responsible for your husband's death? Or that he might have framed Miss Crawford? A tear slid down her wrinkled cheek. Every day since it happened. Herbert and Edward argued terribly the night before my husband died. Herbert had discovered some financial improprieties Edward had been embezzling from the ranch accounts for years. Did you tell the authorities this? I tried, she said bitterly. But Edward controls everything now. He dismissed my concerns as the ramblings of a grief-stricken widow, and without Octavia or proof. She trailed off, then fixed Matthew with a penetrating stare. She is alive, isn't she? Please tell me. Matthew made a decision. Yes, madam. She's alive but injured. She has no memory of her past or what happened here. Relief flooded the old woman's features. Thank God. Marshal, you must help her. My son is dangerous if he learns she's alive. He'll stop at nothing to silence her. Do you have any proof of your suspicions? Anything that might clear Miss Crawford's name?" Mrs. Walsh thought for a moment. Herbert kept a journal. He wrote in it the night before he died, said he was documenting Edward's misdeeds as evidence. Edward searched for it frantically after Herbert passed, but never found it. "Where is it?" Matthew asked eagerly. "I hid it," she confessed. "In Octavia's room, beneath a floorboard under the window seat. I knew Edward wouldn't search there thoroughly since he believed she'd taken everything of value when she fled." Matthew stood. "Mrs. Walsh, with your permission, I'd like to retrieve that journal." She nodded. "Of course. But be cautious, Edward is in Sacramento on business, but due back tomorrow." A maid led Matthew to what had been Octavia's room, a modest but comfortable chamber on the second floor. Once alone, he quickly located the window seat and pried up the loose floorboard beneath it. There, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather-bound journal. Matthew scanned its contents, his heart racing as he read Herbert Walsh's final entry, a detailed account of Edward's financial crimes and his fear that his son might take drastic action to prevent exposure. The old man had even expressed concern for his wife's safety, suspecting Edward might be slowly poisoning her as well. With the journal secured inside his coat, Matthew returned to Mrs. Walsh. "This is exactly what we need," he told her. "I'll take this to the proper authorities in Sacramento." "Take this as well," she said, pressing a small pouch into his hand. Inside was a magnificent ruby pendant. "This is one of the pieces Edward claimed Octavia stole. Its presence here proves her innocence of that crime, at least." As Matthew prepared to depart, Mrs. Walsh grasped his arm with surprising strength. "Tell Octavia I never believed the accusations. And tell her." Her voice broke slightly. "Tell her I released her from her promise to stay with me until the end. She deserves happiness, and I suspect, Marshal, that you might be part of that happiness." Matthew felt his face warm. "I'll tell her, madam. One more thing," Mrs. Walsh added. "The night Edward accused her, I gave Octavia my handkerchief to dry her tears, the one with the embroidered O. It was meant to be a reminder that she would always have a home here with me." "Does she still have it?" "She does," Matthew confirmed. "It's one of her few possessions." The old woman smiled. "Good. Now go, before Edward returns. And Marshal, protect her." Matthew rode hard for Sacramento, arriving just as evening fell. He went directly to the federal marshal's office, presenting Herbert Walsh's journal and explaining the situation. Marshal Jenkins, an old friend, listened gravely to Matthew's account. "This is serious business, Matt," Jenkins said, examining the journal. "Edward Walsh is a respected businessman in these parts. These accusations will cause quite a stir." "The evidence is clear," Matthew insisted. "Herbert Walsh documented everything, and Mrs. Walsh corroborates the account. Octavia Crawford is innocent, and Edward Walsh is not only a thief, but likely a murderer." Jenkins sighed. "I'll wire Judge Patterson first thing in the morning. He'll want to see this evidence personally before issuing any warrants. In the meantime, I suggest you stay out of sight. If Edward Walsh gets wind of this before we can arrest him." "I understand," Matthew said. "But I need to get back to Lone Pine as soon as possible. Octavia Miss Crawford is vulnerable there." "At least wait until morning," Jenkins advised. "The mountain passes are treacherous at night, especially in this weather." Reluctantly, Matthew agreed to stay the night, but sleep eluded him as he worried about Olivia's safety. At first light, he was on the road again, pushing Thunder to her limits as they made their way back toward Lone Pine. Meanwhile, in Lone Pine, Olivia was experiencing increasingly vivid memory flashes. She recalled her life as Octavia Crawford, her orphaned childhood, her employment as companion to the kind Eleanor Walsh, and the terrifying night when Edward Walsh had accused her of theft after she'd overheard him arguing with his father. She remembered fleeing in terror, taking only the clothes on her back and Mrs. Walsh's handkerchief. She'd managed to secure passage on a stagecoach headed east, but somewhere along the route, they'd been attacked by bandits. In the chaos, she'd been struck on the head and left for dead. How she'd ended up under Eagle Creek Bridge remained a mystery, but she suspected she'd been wandering, disoriented from her injury, when exhaustion had finally overcome her. On the afternoon of Matthew's fourth day away, Olivia was startled by a knock at the door. Cautiously, she approached, remembering Matthew's warning to remain out of sight. "Who is it?" she called through the door. "Delivery for Marshal Morgan," came the reply. Olivia hesitated, then opened the door just enough to peek outside. A man she didn't recognize stood on the porch, holding a package. "I can take that for him," she offered. The man's face transformed into a chilling smile. "I thought it might be you, Octavia." Before she could slam the door, Edward Walsh shoved it open, sending Olivia stumbling backward. He entered, closing the door behind him. "You're supposed to be dead," he said conversationally, advancing toward her. "Do you know how inconvenient it is to discover you're very much alive?" Olivia backed away, her mind racing. "Edward Walsh," she said, her memory now crystal clear in the face of danger. "You killed your father." "And I'll kill you too," he replied calmly. "But first, you're going to tell me what you did with his journal." "I don't have it," she said truthfully. "I never did." Edward's face contorted with rage. "Liar. You took it when you fled. My father told me he'd documented everything, all his delusional suspicions about me." "Where is it?" Olivia glanced frantically around the room, looking for a weapon or escape route. "Your mother knows the truth," she said, trying to buy time. "She never believed I stole the jewels or harmed your father." "My mother is a senile old woman," Edward snapped. "And she'll join you and father soon enough. Now, for the last time, where's the journal?" "I told you I don't have it." Edward lunged forward, grabbing Olivia by the throat. "Then you're of no use to me." Olivia clawed at his hands, struggling to breathe as black spots danced before her eyes. With desperate strength, she drove her knee upward, connecting solidly with Edward's groin. He released her with a howl of pain, doubling over. Seizing the opportunity, Olivia grabbed a cast iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all her might. It connected with the side of Edward's head with a sickening thud, and he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Gasping for breath, Olivia stared at Edward's still form. She had to get help, but she didn't dare leave him unattended. Her dilemma was solved moments later when the door burst open, revealing a snow-covered Matthew, gun drawn. "Olivia!" he exclaimed, taking in the scene before him. "Matthew!" She flew into his arms, trembling with relief. "He found me, Edward Walsh. He came looking for his father's journal." Matthew held her tightly. "It's over now? I have the journal, and Marshal Jenkins in Sacramento is preparing to arrest Edward for his crimes. You're safe, and your name will be cleared." As they stood embracing, Edward groaned, beginning to stir. Matthew quickly secured him with handcuffs, then sat Olivia down to explain everything he'd learned at the Triple W Ranch. "Mrs. Walsh never believed the accusations against you," he told her. "She's been living in fear of her son, but she kept Herbert's journal hidden all this time." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "She was always kind to me. I hated leaving her, but I was so frightened." "She understands," Matthew assured her, "and she wants you to be happy." Later that evening, after Edward Walsh had been locked securely in Lone Pines jail to await transfer to Sacramento, Matthew and Olivia sat before the fire in his home, the events of the day finally catching up to them. "So," Matthew said softly, "you remember everything now?" Olivia nodded. "Yes. I am Octavia Crawford, orphaned at 12, employed as companion to Eleanor Walsh for 2 years before everything fell apart." She looked up at him uncertainly. "Does it change anything, knowing who I really am?" Matthew took her hand. "Only in that I now know your real name when I tell you I'm falling in love with you." Her breath caught. "Matthew, I know it's sudden," he continued, "and there's no rush to decide anything. You're free now, free to go back to the Triple W Ranch, or wherever you choose. But I hope," he swallowed hard, "I hope you might consider staying in Lone Pine." Octavia squeezed his hand. "The truth is, I've been falling in love with you since I opened my eyes and saw you watching over me. You believed in me when you had every reason to doubt. You risked everything to prove my innocence." She moved closer to him. "I don't need time to decide. Lone Pine is exactly where I want to be with you." Matthew's face broke into a radiant smile as he gathered her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of happiness. Spring came early to Lone Pine that year. The snow melted from the mountains, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Eagle Creek flowed swift and clear beneath its bridge. On a perfect May afternoon, with the town gathered as witnesses, Marshal Matthew Morgan and Octavia Crawford were married in the small white church on Pinecrest Street. Eleanor Walsh, now free from her son's control after Edward was sentenced to prison for his father's murder, made the journey to attend the wedding, presenting the couple with a generous gift, the deed to a sprawling ranch property adjacent to Lone Pine. "Herbert would have wanted you to have it," she told them. "A place to build your future together." As Matthew and Octavia danced under the stars at their wedding celebration, he held her close and whispered, "I never imagined when I found you under that bridge that I was finding my heart as well." Octavia smiled up at her husband. "And I never dreamed when I woke in a bed with clean sheets that I was waking to the rest of my life, the best part of my life." Their home quickly became the heart of Lone Pine community. Matthew continued serving as marshal, though he began training a deputy with an eye toward eventually focusing solely on their growing ranch. Octavia, with her kind heart and natural leadership, organized the town's first school and served as its teacher until proper facilities could be built. A year after their wedding, their joy multiplied with the birth of their son, whom they named Herbert Wilson Morgan, in honor of the man whose final act of documentation had cleared Octavia's name and the doctor who had helped save her life. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled around their sturdy ranch house, Matthew and Octavia would sit before the fire, little Herbert sleeping peacefully in his cradle beside them, and marvel at the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Octavia asked one such evening. "Finding me that night, taking on all my troubles." Matthew drew her closer. "Not for a single moment. Finding you under that bridge was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I nearly got you killed," she teased. "Especially because of that," he replied with a grin. Keeps life interesting. As the years passed, their family grew with the addition of twin daughters, Eleanor and Margaret. Their ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Matthew eventually handed over his marshal's badge to his well-trained deputy, focusing his energies on the ranch and his beloved family. Octavia maintained a close correspondence with Eleanor Walsh until the elderly woman's peaceful passing 5 years after the wedding. She left her entire estate to the Morgans, with the stipulation that they establish a home for orphan girls, a project that became Octavia's passionate mission. On the 10th anniversary of the night Matthew found Octavia under Eagle Creek Bridge, they walked there together, hand in hand in the moonlight. "It seems impossible," Octavia said, looking at the dark space beneath the stone arch, "that something so wonderful could begin in such a desperate place." Matthew wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I think that's often how the best stories unfold, beginning in darkness, but finding their way to light." She leaned into his embrace. "I still have nightmares sometimes, you know. About that night, about Edward. And I still have the occasional dream about finding you too late," Matthew admitted. "But then I wake up with you beside me, and I remember that we won. Love won." They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the creek's gentle murmur. A decade had transformed them, both. Matthew's dark hair now threaded with distinguished silver at the temples, Octavia's face bearing the subtle lines of motherhood and laughter. "We should get back," Octavia said eventually. "Mrs. Tanner can only handle the children for so long before Herbert convinces her to let him stay up past bedtime." Matthew chuckled. "That boy could talk the birds down from the trees. Gets that from his mother." Octavia playfully swatted his arm. "Says the man who convinced an entire town to build a school with just one impassioned speech." As they walked home under the vast canopy of stars, Matthew marveled at the twists of fate that had brought them to this perfect happiness. From a cold night and a desperate situation had grown a love story for the ages, a testament to faith, courage, and the healing power of clean sheets and second chances. Their lives continued to flourish as Lone Pine grew from a small settlement into a proper town. The Morgan children thrived, Herbert following in his father's footsteps with a keen sense of justice, eventually becoming a lawyer, Eleanor revealing a talent for medicine and training with Doc Wilson's successor, and Margaret discovering a passion for horses that made her the finest breeder in 3 counties. The orphanage that Octavia established became renowned throughout California, not merely as a refuge, but as a place of opportunity and education for girls who might otherwise have been forgotten. Many of its graduates went on to become teachers, nurses, and businesswomen, forever grateful to the woman who had once been homeless herself. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire town of Lone Pine gathered to celebrate the couple who had contributed so much to the community's growth and prosperity. A commemorative plaque was placed at Eagle Creek Bridge, bearing a simple inscription. From this bridge came the foundation of our town's future. Later that night, alone in their bedroom in the ranch house that had expanded along with their family and dreams, Matthew took Octavia's hands in his. 25 years, he marveled. And somehow, you're even more beautiful to me now than when I first saw you. Octavia laughed. I was half dead and filthy then, so I should hope so. You were a mystery, Matthew corrected. A beautiful mystery that I've had the privilege of solving every day since. And have you, she asked softly, solved me completely? Matthew's eyes crinkled with the smile that still made her heart race. Not even close. And that's the greatest gift of all, that after 25 years, you can still surprise me, still teach me, still make me fall in love with you all over again each day. Octavia leaned forward, resting her forehead against his in the gesture that had become their most intimate connection. From a bridge to forever, she whispered. Who would have thought it possible? I did, Matthew replied. The moment you opened those green eyes and looked at me, I knew we were beginning something extraordinary. As moonlight filtered through their bedroom window, casting silver patterns across the floor, they held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together, a desperate night, a chance discovery, and the simple kindness of clean sheets that had blossomed into a lifetime of love. And in the quiet of the night, as they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, both silently offered thanks for the bridge that had connected their separate paths into one shared journey, a journey that had led them home to each other, and would continue to guide them forward into whatever adventures still awaited in the chapters yet to be written.